This is one of the world's most important waterways, especially for oil and gas trade. The Strait of Hormuz. Located within Iranian and Omani territorial waters, the strait is the only sea passage between the Persian Gulf and the open ocean. 1/5 of global seaborne oil and gas passes through this channel.
The most dependency for Strait of Hormuz, or for that matter, the Middle Eastern oil, is the Asian countries, right? So if you look at the top 4 big importers, China, India, South Korea, and Japan, they have huge dependency.
About 80% of the oil and gas shipments through the strait is Asia-bound. But there is a sword hanging over this vital sea passage. After the recent Israel-Iran conflict, is the Strait of Hormuz at risk of being shut? On June 13, 2025, Israel launched a barrage of airstrikes on Iran, striking dozens of military targets, including suspected nuclear sites. The attacks killed the chief of Iran's Revolutionary Guard, the head of the Guard's ballistic missile program, and some of Iran's top nuclear scientists.
Since the 1990s, Prime Minister Netanyahu has been saying that he's worried about Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. And throughout the past 3 decades, his method of choice for dealing with the nuclear threat that Iran posed to Israel was to use the military solution.
So, why did Israel strike now? The attack follows conflict between Israel and Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hamas and Hezbollah are militant groups supported by Iran.
Iran's forward defense strategy, which relied on non-state allies like Hezbollah, was severely undermined by the decimation of Hezbollah, by what's happening in Gaza with Hamas, by the fall of Bashar al-Assad. Except for the Houthi rebels in Yemen, they didn't really have a forward defense strategy of any kind.
Israel had also degraded Iran's aerial defense systems in its own direct confrontation with Iran in October of 2024. But I think for Prime Minister Netanyahu, this was a moment of opportunity because, in his view, Iran was vulnerable.
Shortly after Israel's initial strikes, Iran hit back, unleashing drones and missiles that breached Israel's Iron Dome air defense system.
And the idea that the Iranians had was that if this turns into an attritional conflict, Iran has a higher threshold for pain than Israel, and therefore it is better placed to come up out of this conflict with the upper hand.
At first, the US, Israel's most powerful ally, stayed on the sidelines. But 1 week into the war, it launched a direct strike on Iran's nuclear facilities.
At the end of the day, Iran is a much weaker power from a conventional military perspective compared to Israel. But of course, when the United States joined the conflict, it was an entirely different game. Iran was outgunned by Israel, but it was completely outmatched by the United States.
Unable to prevail militarily, Iran would play the ace up its sleeve. On June 23rd, a day after the US bombing, the Iranian parliament voted to close the vital Strait of Hormuz. Iran had repeatedly warned of closing the waterway in past conflicts, but has never fully carried out the threat.
Even in the history, tanker wars, essentially, which happened around Iran-Iraq conflict back in the 1980s, right? You had hundreds of tankers which were attacked. Basically, they wanted to disrupt each other's oil revenues, right? But even then, we did not see Strait of Hormuz closed. We did see some attacks on tankers per se, right? After, I think, a military general was killed in Iran, right? So we do see that as a strategic leverage in terms of disrupting global oil flows and hurting the global economy.
The Hormuz Strait, at its narrowest point, is 33 kilometers across. Blockading it would be difficult, not to mention illegal, under international law. and Iran lacks the conventional means to do so.
Iran is a regime that has been under sanctions for much of its 46 years in existence. As a result, Iran does not have an air force to speak of. It does not have a navy to speak of.
So, how can Iran close the Strait of Hormuz? In the past, it had used small fast boats to attack tankers. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy is estimated to have over 1,000 of these crafts. Then, according to US intelligence, in the days following Israel's initial missile strike on June 13, Iranian forces began loading naval mines onto vessels in the Persian Gulf.
From the Iranian perspective, that's a fairly low-cost option because it's a one-time effort, and thereafter they don't have to put naval assets at risk.
There would be some drone warfare in that sense, right? They can attack ships with missiles and so on, which you've seen, right? So if they were to disrupt severely for a short period of time, it is doable.
The closure of the strait, and indeed any conflict in the Middle East, would impact global energy prices.
If you see the oil markets, we had a huge reaction in terms of a very short period of time. The oil prices went up all the way to 80 after the attacks on the nuclear sites over the weekend. The first order impact would be, you see, your gasoline prices, right? What you burn into your cars and so on. But there's a bigger second order impact into everything we consume, right? It goes into plastic, it goes into your natural gas. So oil is still a very integral part of our everyday lives, right? Another impact was on the shipping prices. We did see those tanker freight rates effectively in that short period of time go up almost 3 or 4 times. We also had the war risk insurance premium for the ship fleet as such, or the ships which are going in, that also effectively triple or quadruple.
After a 12-day war, Israel and Iran reached a ceasefire agreement, bringing an end to the conflict, at least for now. Oil and shipping prices eased in response. Yet, the Iranian parliamentary order to close the strait still stands. According to one Iranian lawmaker, military measures concerning the Strait of Hormuz have been completed, though no decision has been made on closing the passage.
For Iran to do so, it would need a decision by the National Security Council, which really means a decision by the supreme leader. It's unlikely that Iran at this point would want to do so. That would create a real crisis in Iranian relations with the Gulf states, which it doesn't want at this point.
It would also cut off Iran's own ability to export oil to China, which is Iran's sole customer for its oil. And this is an important lifeline to the Iranian regime. So there's no reason for them to do that. But in practice, they have options that are less risky and dangerous for them, including targeting shipping lanes that they did in the summer of 2019 through targeting tankers and mining the waterways, basically create serious issues for the free flow of energy out of the strait without physically blockading it.
As Asia watched the Israel-Iran conflict from the sidelines, what impact did it have on the continent's 2 largest giants, China and India?